Welcome to Cow Talks. This is Marcelo Valau, Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Florida. And this is our podcast, where we dive into the main topics affecting livestock and forage production in the Southeastern United States. Join us in this journey as we tackle the main issues affecting our producers and the sustainability of our production systems. Welcome to Cow Talks, the podcast that brings you the latest information in livestock industry in the Southeastern United States. I'm Marcelo Valau, Forage Extension Specialist and Associate Program Leader at the University of Florida, and your host. Today with me is Dr. Diane Kitchen. She's a veterinary manager for bovine and cervidae programs with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and is also the state's epidemiologist. Dr. Kitchen is here to talk about a new old problem that we might have in the United States and in Florida. That's the new World Screwworm. For those that have not listened to the first episode on the series about screwworm, check our podcast with Dr. Andrew Schwartz and Dr. Ted Burgess that tells us a little bit more about the history and the cause of the problem and why we're worried about this. Just a quick disclaimer. This podcast is being recorded on August 7, 2025, and this is a very fast evolving issue. For more updates, check the official channels for USDA APHIS and also for FDACS, and that's where the most updated information is going to be if you happen to listen to this podcast in a later date. Dr. Kitchen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us.
So Dr. Schwartz talked to us a lot about the biology of the problem, the ecology of the problem, the origins and history, how we got rid of it. So why are we still getting back that? Why are we getting worried about that again?
So the concern for us is this is not something that Florida has not experienced before, but it has been some time since we were endemic for the disease, as was shown in Dr. Short's excellent description of the history of this disease. And so currently there has been a reemergence of the disease as it has moved northward from a maintained barrier that was discussed again in the technique for control. And as it approaches closer to the United States, our fear is that there will be a detection in the United States, and we want to be particularly vigilant because it's been quite a rapidly evolving northward migration of this pest and through most of Central America into Mexico. And now most recently, as of right now, the closest detection was about 370 miles south of the Texas-Mexico border. And it has been in a very short amount of time that there has been that reemergence in the northward migration of this disease. So we're trying to make people aware, keep people diligent in observing. The first thing we need to say is that it has not currently been detected in the United States as a established population of New World Screwworm. There have been little outbreaks and incidents. Again, I believe the 2016-2017 incident was discussed in the previous podcast, so we won't really go into that. And that was in the Florida Keys, and we did effectively eradicate it again at that time. But at the moment, there are no detections in the United States, but we are very concerned about the potential because of the migration northward. Please do be alert. Please be prepared. That's the point of our discussion, is everybody needs to be involved in this response and this preparedness.
Pretty much at the point we are today, there is no need to panic, but there is very important to be prepared and observe and also report, which is what we're going to talk today. And actually, this is not a problem only for livestock.
No, this is the insect itself. The larva will feed on any warm-blooded animal, and that includes humans, and it even includes birds. It's less common in birds, but anything that is a warm-blooded animal can be impacted by this disease. So that means your pet dogs and cats and guinea pigs and that sort of thing need to be monitored, as well as livestock and horses and wildlife. And that's a big part of the thing also, is all wildlife species.
Yeah, so this is a problem that really can have the potential to affect all of us in the society in multiple different ways. So let's talk about the surveillance and communication. What's the surveillance activities that are available now, and what do you expect people to do in terms of surveillance?
Right. And that's really the main, at the moment, priority in our preparedness is outreach and education, is to ensure that people are diligent and are watching their own animals and the wildlife in their areas, and that they are quickly notifying us of any concerns that they have. And the efforts are from not only our agency, but Florida Fish and Wildlife Agency is very involved. Our commissioner has just made it a real priority. We're lucky we have a commissioner who is himself engaged in agriculture, and so he recognizes the significant impact that could come if we did in fact miss a detection or were late in detecting and not jumping on a response. So we're doing a lot of outreach with stakeholder groups, whether it's animal industries, and also with veterinarians, those who are going to be seeing the companion animals, with our zoo veterinarians, with everybody. We're working with state animal health officials in other states to make sure we harmonize the response and make sure that indeed detection is as early as possible. The general public's role in this is that if you see something, say something. It's much like many other preparedness things, is that we need to be made aware. You're the best eyes, and we need you to then notify us so we can in fact go on and respond and determine whether or not it is something that warrants concern.
I'm just going to make a plug here for the episode that we recorded with Dr. Short. We covered this there, but I just want to highlight what we're seeing here. Especially a lot of people may be worried if they see roadkill or house flies that are metallic looking. They are not necessarily.
Exactly. Larvae themselves require a living animal for them to be feeding on. They feed on the tissue of a living animal. So they are not going to be the maggots that you see in the roadkill. They are going to be a larva that is actually consuming living tissue. They're not, even some of the blowflies will be on a living animal, but they're kind of superficially on a living animal, and they're consuming often the debris in hair or in wet matted hair and that sort of thing. And they will actually join New World Screwworm in a wound that has been created for New World Screwworm, but they are not consuming the living tissue. They eat the organic dead debris. New World Screwworm larvae are actually burrow down into the tissue and consume living tissue and require that animal to be alive. In fact, they quite rapidly will leave an animal after that animal succumbs. It is not the roadkill that we need to be looking for. What we are looking for is people to report instances where they have myiasis, which that's the term for the infestation of these maggots in a wound on a living animal.
And we also are going to put in the description of this podcast here how to report specifically for the Florida audience through the FDACS website, fdacs.gov/RAD.
Right. And that on the slides, if those are showing, if you're able to see the slides, there are QR codes that go to help assist you in reporting also. So the previous slide had the RAD, and there's an upcoming slide that will also have reporting information. And that is the thing, contact your veterinarian. Again, that's going to come up multiple times in this, but that's the first thing. Contact your veterinarian. We're working very closely with veterinarians to ensure they know how, and if they see a case, we're getting those submitted and identified. And they should start seeing in feed stores, at livestock markets, at sales facilities that are going on, in veterinary offices, brochures that are going out, flyers, posters, even at places like ports, because again, any warm-blooded animal can be affected. So if you are taking your dog on a cruise and going to some of the Caribbean islands, which are also endemic for this disease and that sort of thing, we want people to be aware. Any warm-blooded animal is susceptible to this disease. And there have been humans that have returned from foreign travel who have been infested. So all of that is important. And the poster is one that you would see. So our real priority on surveillance is actual cases of, as I said, myiasis, live animals with maggots. And we will facilitate the submission of those larvae to, there is a National Veterinary Services laboratory, but we facilitate everything from the FedEx shipping of it. The samples should be collected in 70% alcohol as a preservative, and that also kills the larva. But as I also said, they need to ensure they've talked to their veterinarian and the animal itself has been treated if they are seeing myiasis in a live animal, but certainly reach out to us and report. The other surveillance that does go on and is really more of a target. So in areas of detection or areas that are proximate to where there have been detections, there's also fly trapping that is done. And there's a variety of mechanisms by which we use baited traps to capture flies. And then we look at those flies. As you said earlier, the actual, the pictures you see are the bright red eyes and the metallic body, but they're not the only fly that has that general appearance. Those of us who are used to looking at the fly, actually, you have to get down to almost microscopic levels and look at how the little hairs are placed around the eyes, how the eyes are set, fine details about the lines on the stripes on that metallic back that they have and the bright appearance. They're actually a very pretty fly. I don't want them here, but they are a very pretty fly. And so the trapping of flies then requires additional evaluation to see, is it actually a New World screwworm fly, or is it the Macellaria, which is what's called the secondary screwworm, which is actually a blowfly type fly, and so is not consuming living tissue. We use the gold standard on fly trapping is done over a plate of rotted bovine liver, and it is very attractive to the fly, and that's the goal, is to have something that's going to attract those flies. The New World screwworm, I believe Dr. Short talked about, is not a fly that gets in devastatingly huge populations. It's going to be, you may have a plate there full of a lot of flies and only one or two of them be New World screwworm flies, and the majority of them be a variety of other blowflies and other house flies and that sort of thing that are not of any concern, but still are attracted to the odor produced by that liver. The same thing happens for us in the other traps that are on the picture shown there, the vertical traps and the sticky traps, and what we call a gator trap, which actually has a sensed lure inside it. Those are set up to attract New World screwworm flies, but that's not the only fly that gets in those traps. And so then it's an additional process of actually reviewing the flies that are caught. And fly trapping is not going to be how we determine that it's in an area. Fly trapping is used to try and determine distribution after you know that it's present. So fly trapping is utilized to say how far away from that farm where you did detect it, how far away there are flies that are actually present. And fly trapping, most importantly, is utilized at the point at which we start doing sterile insect technique in trying to eradicate, because that's how we determine that we're getting an adequate population of the irradiated sterile flies to actually effectively control the population.
There is a large effort across the United States, across the southern states of the United States, in a partnership between the state and federal government, right, on trapping going on.
Exactly. So the USDA has two strike teams, a Southwest and a Southeast strike team for the fly trapping activities themselves. And then the state of Florida, it has been, the commissioner has been incredibly supportive over the fact of us getting teams in we have 6 districts of our field teams, and each of those 6 districts have people who are trained in setting up the traps, doing the initial surveillance of the flies that are captured, and getting some of that fly surveillance done. So that those activities are very much being coordinated between USDA, our agency, and also, we are regularly talking with the state animal health officials in Georgia. We're regularly talking with the state animal health officials in Texas. That we're regularly talking with California. All of us are all kind of coordinating together to ensure that there is what resources we have. We have to realize the reason that I said at the beginning, this is collaborative, and our real front line is the veterinarians and the producers, and their observation for cases is we can't be everywhere. And all of us, whether it's USDA or state departments of agriculture, are limited in our resources. You can only be so many places at one time.
And also that's why it's important that the public, both in producer in the livestock industry, but also the general public, can help with this monitoring.
They can help with, yes, exactly. That's why we're saying report. If you see something, we would far rather get 1,000 that are not New World screwworm than miss the one case where it is there, because time is very important. And the impact of a detection is quite dramatic. And so there's a lot of changes that occur as a result of this infestation. It does change the actual population dynamics of most species as it affects them, because there is a preference for navels, which means newborns, of course, are innately not as healthy and strong as the adult population anyway, but that predilection to the navel means that they are the most susceptible population. And of course, that then means that you've changed your population dynamics. When New World Screwworm was in the state of Florida previously in the 50s, it dramatically controlled the population of white-tailed deer, for instance, in the state. And so populations will be changed. Producers themselves will have to make considerations on changes to their management practices if it is here and is an established population. There is the potential for trade implications for producers because of the fact that it is a reportable disease. It would be reported internationally, so there will be potentially some international. There's a lot of work going on to mitigate and manage those impacts, but other countries could say, we don't want your product because you have this disease. That happens with a lot of diseases. And certainly other states could say, oh, until we know what's going on, we don't want to receive any of your animals or that sort of thing. Obviously, the surveillance activities we've talked about a lot would be greatly heightened if after there's a detection, they're going to be ramped up even more. That's why we're starting to have these strike teams. That's why we're having the training events so that we can have that happen. And there will most definitely be movement restrictions that occur once there is a detection. And so all those considerations have to be remembered. And that's why those impacts are going to be much less if we can make the detection early and have this controlled to a smaller geographic area rather than have it expand.
We're looking for the myiasis. We're trying to find, well, hopefully not finding, but we're looking for that disease. Once you find the animal, that's wildlife or that's livestock, what are the steps that the producers or hunters or general public need to do we would talk about the reporting, but what is the steps about treatment and everything else related to that?
So there's kind of two levels here. On the individual animal itself, where the detection occurs, then the steps really involve the removal of all of those larvae that are present. And those larvae can be quite deep into a wound, but removal of those, treatment may even require pain relief and antibiotics, depending how extensive the wound is of the animal. And so that's why we say consult your veterinarian. You really need to get, these are not, generally, they're not just a little minor wound. These are serious, deep infestations that do occur. And a lot of tissue damage has occurred. Evaluating the rest of your herd is going to be essential. But those larvae that are removed need to be killed. As I said, 70% alcohol is a very effective way to kill the larvae. And they need to be collected and they need to be reported to us. And so then is when the increased observation and planning needs to go on within your herd and your entire area as far as that goes. Don't just notify us. Certainly we're a priority, or USDA, your veterinarian, all, notify as far as that goes. But this isn't a disease that you want to hide. You want to make sure your neighbors know so they can start protecting their animals as well. The flies themselves obviously do not understand property lines. They don't understand state lines and they don't understand international lines, but they certainly don't understand property lines. And so they are a risk for everybody and the wildlife that are in that area. So getting awareness out is going to be important. It will, once again, a detection has occurred in an area and we have an area that is then considered to be an infested zone. In that area, there's going to be changes to the management that occurs within herds. Every time that you do anything that creates a wound, as small as applying an ear tag, that's going to be important. That serves as a source for where the infestation could start. Any animal that you have that gets injured, or whether it's bruising or even, and particularly if it's opening a wound, any of those need to be really closely observed to ensure that they are indeed healing and not becoming infested with the New World Screwworm. every navel needs to be evaluated. Every navel needs to be treated so that we prevent infestation in those navels. And even the plans that you have, particularly this is more seasonal, of fly and tick control need to be considered, because it can be a wound as small as a tick bite that is what gets infested by those females laying their eggs. And so all of those are considerations that you have to have when you're evaluating once there has been a detection, as far as that goes. The other thing to realize is, once that there is a detection that has occurred, is that then there are going to be some added requirements regarding movement, not only of your animals. In this situation, for instance, in the Keys, we did a quarantine that was for the entire Florida Keys. We don't restrict just a single premises and quarantine it. It's a wider area. We determine an infested area, and that all of that area is then going to be under some restrictions that are going to be occurring as far as that goes. And so that would be putting in considerations. In general, we prefer that you not move an animal that you consider to be infested, that you not move it a particularly great distance, because then you risk transporting. And if those larvae are falling out, if they're at the stage where they're close to pupating and they fall out, you may then be allowing them to. So we would rather, as much as possible, treat actually where the animal is at. Now, that's probably not going to be the way it's detected in companion animals, for instance. They're probably going to have gone to their veterinarian and that sort of thing. But then we want to contain there and contain any of those larvae so that they are not being just freely disposed of. We don't want to just bury the animal, for instance. And so it doesn't matter whether it's your dog or your cat, or it's the zoo animals, captive wildlife, free-ranging wildlife, all of those, that diligence. If you happen to be somebody who has game cameras out and you see something that's in the wildlife population on your farm or ranch, again, report to us, reach out and contact us. We can get with resources in Florida Fish and Wildlife and dart the animal and inspect it and determine whether or not it does. And so there, all of that is going to need to be considered.
But currently, there are very few labeled products that are used for the treatment, right?
Right. So currently, there is only one product that is labeled in the United States as approved for New World Screwworm. That is actually a topical that gets applied directly to the wound. It's a spray that gets applied directly to the wound. There's an extensive effort going on with FDA and EPA regarding emergency uses and extra label uses of pharmaceuticals and pesticides for managing this disease. And so that's an ongoing thing. There is, and you'll find on our website, there's a link to FDA has recently put out some additional information regarding this as well. But there are products that are effective, but that are not labeled for New World Screwworm at this time. Those products would then be what's called extra label use, which is allowed to occur with the pharmaceutical type, the FDA approved products can be used extra label. That is something that needs to be considered. A lot of these products are labeled in other countries for use with New World Screwworm, but not in this country. So this is very much a topic that you'll have to stay tuned on. And you should note that if extra label use is done, then that may change the withdrawal time of some of these products. So if you're in production animal, what you may have to consider that may change when you can take animals to slaughter. There are no treatments that are known to be effective that have a 0-day slaughter withdrawal. And so that is going to be another part of your planning process. And there are a few products that people might think are going to be ones that you want to jump on and use, the moxidectin and the eprimectin, both of which are very commonly used in our production processes and do have slaughter withdrawals of 0 days, which is nice about them. And they're topical products, which that makes people like them a lot. But they have been found to be either totally ineffective or certainly significantly less effective for New World Screwworm. So they're not ones that we want people to select. The products that we do know have efficacy are the avermectins, ivermectin and doramectin. And then there's a number of products that are currently available for use in companion animals that Capstar is one of the trade names, and a number of the flea and tick preparations that are from the Fluralaner family are available and are currently being used in companion animals for flea and tick control. And so our veterinarians have them, and people are already utilizing them for companion animals. Those products are available in some other countries in preparations that can be used in livestock. And so there is work to try and get some of those products available, but that is an ongoing process. You'll just have to stay tuned and keep watching our websites as far as that goes. The best resource for labeling is FARAD, farad.org, which is up on the screen at the moment. And that is the best way to determine what would be your withdrawal times in the event of extra label use of a product. And there is a QR code there for that one as well. And that FDA resource is available on our website.
This is a disease that can be potentially or actually highly lethal.
It can be, yes, if it's not treated.
If it's not treated, then the damage can be so significant there is no way back for the animal.
Correct.
What in a case that we are in that point that the animal dies, what are the steps for carcass disposal?
Yeah, and the important things to remember on that are that, as I said earlier, the larva itself require a living tissue. That's part of their mechanism of getting oxygen, is actually that because they're well burrowed into the tissue and they would not be able to breathe, is that they want to be consuming oxygenated blood, and in that process, so they are not very happy when the animal itself dies. But those that are second and third instar, which is more mature larvae, those larvae are very capable of exiting that carcass soon after the death of an animal. They can then, if there is ground available, they can drop into the ground, pupate, later hatch, and establish a population. And so that's why it's so important to manage these carcasses. The preferred method is incineration, and that for companion animals and for a lot of other animals, that's a viable option to do. But incineration certainly is preferred. But if that can't be done fairly quickly, or if that's not going to be possible to be done, then the key is going to be to kill the larva. And that's where we get into, as I said, alcohol is very effective in killing these larvae. It needs to be 70% or greater alcohol that is utilized to kill them. And there's a number of pesticides, which at this point right now are not labeled for use in New World Screwworm. Should we stop? But can be used, but do effectively kill the larva. Double bagging, again, to help in just ensuring all larvae are contained within whatever the chemical is, whether it's alcohol or pesticides that's being utilized to kill the larva. It's also important to note that freezing alone does not kill these larvae. We had during the episode in the Keys, we would freeze carcasses because we were incinerating in that case, but we had more mortality than we had incinerator space. And so we would freeze carcasses until we had incinerator time available. And when those carcasses were then thawed, there was viable larvae still present in those carcasses. Now, so that was just a freezer like is used in a grocery store. It's not ultra cold. They can be killed by the ultra cold freezing. There are processes by which they can be frozen, but don't presume that just by throwing the animal in the freezer you're going to have killed the larva. And if you do that and then bury them, you probably have just established a population.
So I want to get more to the point. We talked about the disease, the detection, and the importance of surveillance. And I want to go back to how we opened this conversation in the importance of surveillance. I want to tap a little bit in your experience in the Keys. Why is that early detection so important, and what is the cost of not reporting?
Right. So the key on early detection is, again, if this can be contained to a smaller geographic area, remembering that as was discussed in the previous podcast, our best mechanism of actually eradicating the disease is the sterile insect technique. And so that requires the dispersal of sterilized flies to then break the whole life cycle and eliminate the population. And our limiting factor on that is the production of sterilized flies. There is only one facility producing flies at the moment. It's in Panama. And the bottom line is that there just is not enough sterile fly production to, if we allow this to get into an expanded geographic area, for us to be able to eradicate the disease short term. There's a lot of work going on to try and get additional production, but that is a process that is 18 months, 2 years, potentially even 3 years down the road. And so that is something we need to keep this contained to smaller areas. And early detection, this is not a fly that, at least initially, is in a huge population necessarily. So if we can nip it in the bud, it makes a big difference. The economic impact of this disease is huge and is in the billions, and is probably something that we can't even talk to your grandfathers, I guess is what I would say. The financial side alone, it's much more than that. It is that it changes every day on your operation. It means that the priority of the day has to be that somebody is checking all of those animals on a very regular basis, that every navel is treated and managed, that every time you get the animals up to do dehornings, to put tags in, to even vaccinations, and the consideration of more tick control that has to be done, which is more times of getting the cattle up and working the cattle, catching your sheep. Every time you shear your sheep, you have to worry about every management process that goes on. You have to think about and consider whether or not there's an injury that potentially is going to serve as a source for the infestation by these New World screwworm. So your whole life has changed, not just the fact that it is also hugely economically costly. The cost of the sterile fly technique, the cost of our response activities, the potential impacts on trade, the actual loss of animals within individual producers and of our overall herd, all of which have significant financial impact for us. There is more specifics on the actual cost of efforts and broken down some both at our website and the USDA website now, as far as that goes, regarding historically what some of the costs have been. Even though the Florida Keys incident was a really relatively small geographically area that was involved, the response to that incursion was over $3 million for the federal government and over $2 million for the state of Florida. So, and that was just in the Florida Keys. And that was one that we were very lucky because we were easily able to manage. There's only one road in and one road out of the Keys. And so there was an interdiction station that was set up. And so movement controls were much easier in that situation than they would be in the event of a more broad geographic area.
So I think it is very important to highlight the importance of the surveillance and reporting here. I also noticed on the conversation we had before in your presentation that you're not only targeting livestock and vet, you're also talking about physicians. So
yes,
this can affect humans.
This can affect humans. It did historically in Florida. There was a number of human cases. And a number of the introductions that have occurred over the last 20 years that we are aware of that have been from a foreign traveler or an imported animal, either one. But a number of those have been human cases where humans have traveled to an area where it is endemic and been infested in that country and then returned home before they were diagnosed. So CDC is working very much to get out, similarly to how we're doing outreach. They're doing outreach with physicians. So again, that we get early recognition if there's human cases. A person, legally, a person who is aware of a reportable or potentially emergency or an economically impactful disease is required to report under one of our 5C20. Veterinarians, as part of their oath, are responsible for reporting, but physicians also have an oath, and they are working very hard to ensure that they are aware. A lot of physicians that are younger, or certainly, or that did not grow up in an area where there is this pest, don't think very much. They are less likely to think of it than veterinarians are, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, this is something
and don't forget wildlife.
Wildlife, yeah, I was going to mention this is something that is very big on wildlife, and I was checking some data from Uruguay. You presented some data from Uruguay recently, and several of the cases are being spread by feral hogs.
Feral hogs, yeah, and they're really excellent for the sake of the fly mechanism by which the distribution can be increased, because an infested hog will still swim across a river, and the flies themselves don't like to go over water. The feral swine have no problem. They often have very large ranges where they're going, and so feral swine can play a very big role in Central America. Some of the big cats that are wild big cats, the mountain lions and that sort of, the jaguars, those sort of animals will have ranges of 100 miles that they're traveling. And so an animal can be infested at one end of their range and while they're infested, having deposits of mature larvae all along till where they finally will succumb. But that may be 2 weeks down the road before they succumb. And during that time, they may have traveled great parts of that 100-mile range.
So definitely something we need to be very aware of. I'm glad it's not here yet, but there is a high potential for coming here. Yes. And the way we can do our part is monitoring and
reporting. There is this slide currently up there's many mechanisms for reporting to us for domestic animals and livestock. Talk to your physician if you're concerned about it in a human. There is also the contacts for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. If you see something in wildlife, we work closely with them, but reporting really is the key. And monitor your animals. Be diligent about watching what's happening with your animals, and that's going to really be the important thing to do.
Thanks so much for joining us in the podcast today. Very important information for our farmers, for our community in general. And I hope through this vehicle of communication, we can spread more the word and help us preventing the expansion of this disease here in the United States.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. For those that are interested in more episodes, please keep an eye on our social media, and also the weekly or bi-weekly updates of our podcast, Cow Talks, and also Forage Nexus. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and looking forward to seeing you in our next episode. Thank you. This podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida Forage Team with technical support from the University of Florida College of Agriculture and Life Sciences Faculty Instructional Resource and Support Team. This episode was produced by Marcelo Valal, Olivia Mowley, and Ashley Kanabrowski. We hope you have enjoyed this podcast. If you have any comments or thoughts to share with us, please reach out to us through our email, forages@ifas.ufl.edu, and find us on our social media, uf.forages on Instagram, UF Forage Team on Facebook, or UF IFAS Forages on YouTube. We hope to see you in our next episode.